The camera operators knew something was wrong 30 seconds before America did. They could see it in Clint Eastwood's posture, the way his jaw set, the way his hand gripped the armrest of his chair just a little too tightly, the way his eyes locked onto Muhammad Ali with an expression that had nothing to do with Hollywood charm and everything to do with genuine anger. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, October 12, 1972. 70 million people watching live. Clint Eastwood was there to promote his new film, Joe Kid. Muhammad Ali was there because the Supreme Court had overturned his draft conviction 4 months earlier, and he was rebuilding his public image. The plan was simple. Keep them on separate segments, have Carson mediate, keep everything light and entertaining. But 23 minutes into the show, Johnny Carson made a decision that would create the most explosive moment in television history. He invited both men onto the stage at the same time. Before we continue with the story, you can support us by subscribing to the channel and liking the video. Don't forget to write in the comments where you're watching from and how old you are. Let's continue. What happened in the next 14 minutes wasn't just television. It was a cultural collision. Two of the most famous men in America, one who represented traditional American masculinity, one who had defied it, forced to sit 3 feet apart and answer the same question. What does it mean to be brave? Eastwood's answer took 45 seconds. Professional. Measured. Exactly what America expected. Ali's answer took 11 minutes. And by the time he finished, Clint Eastwood, the man who had made a career playing characters who never ran out of words, had nothing to say. This is the story of the night Muhammad Ali didn't just beat Clint Eastwood in an argument. He proved that everything Eastwood had built his career on was a lie. October 1972. America was exhausted. The Vietnam War was entering its 8th year. Richard Nixon was running for re-election. The country was divided in ways that made civil conversation nearly impossible. And television, the medium that brought America together every night, had become a battleground for those divisions. The Tonight Show was supposed to be neutral ground. Johnny Carson had built his entire career on being likable, non-threatening, and carefully apolitical. But even Carson couldn't completely avoid the tensions splitting the country in half. Muhammad Ali had been absent from boxing for 3.5 years. His refusal to be drafted in 1967 had cost him his title, his license, and nearly his freedom. But in June 1971, the Supreme Court overturned his conviction 8-0. Ali was free, legal, and determined to reclaim everything he'd lost. By October 1972, Ali had fought his way back. He'd beaten Jerry Quarry. He'd beaten Oscar Bonavena. He'd lost to Joe Frazier in the fight of the century, but had proven he was still elite. He was rebuilding his reputation fight by fight, interview by interview, television appearance by television appearance. Clint Eastwood was at the peak of his powers. Dirty Harry had been released in 1971 and had become a cultural phenomenon. Eastwood's character, Harry Callahan, the cop who didn't follow rules, who solved problems with violence, who embodied a fantasy of American masculinity that transcended politics, had made Eastwood one of the biggest stars in the world. But there was tension beneath the surface. Dirty Harry had been criticized by liberals as fascist propaganda. Eastwood had been accused of glorifying vigilante justice. And Ali, who represented everything Dirty Harry opposed, had become a symbol of the counterculture that Eastwood's films seemed to reject. When Carson's producers booked both men for the same show, they thought they were being clever. Book them for different segments. Have Ali on first. Let him promote his upcoming fight. Then bring out Eastwood for the second segment. Keep them separate. No conflict. No controversy. But Johnny Carson had other plans. Ali walked onto the Tonight Show stage at 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time. He was wearing a dark suit, a bow tie, and his signature confidence. The audience erupted. Not everyone was cheering. This was 1972, and Ali was still divisive, but enough people were cheering that it felt like a victory. Carson stood to greet him. They shook hands. Ali sat down, and for the first 12 minutes, everything went exactly as planned. Carson asked about the Frazier fight. Ali answered with humor and self-deprecation. Carson asked about his plans to fight again. Ollie predicted he'd reclaim the heavyweight championship within 2 years. The audience laughed. Ollie performed. It was classic Tonight Show material. Then Carson shifted topics. Muhammad, you've been through a lot in the past 5 years. The draft, the conviction, the ban from boxing. Now you're back. What's that been like? Ollie's smile faded slightly. Not gone, but tempered. It's been hard, Johnny. But I did what I thought was right. And I'd do it again. Even knowing what it cost you. Especially knowing what it cost me. Because if you don't stand up for what you believe, then what are you? The audience was quiet now. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real. Carson nodded, looked at his notes, and then he said something that changed everything. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we've got Clint Eastwood joining us. I think it might be interesting to get both of your perspectives on some of these questions. Ollie's expression didn't change. But backstage, producers were panicking. This wasn't the plan. They'd explicitly agreed to keep Ollie and Eastwood separated. Carson was going off script. But Carson was Johnny Carson. And when you were Johnny Carson in 1972, you did what you wanted. The commercial break lasted 90 seconds. When the show came back, Clint Eastwood walked onto the stage. He was 42 years old, 6 feet 4 inches tall, lean, controlled. He moved with the same quiet intensity he brought to his films. Minimal motion, maximum presence. He shook Carson's hand, nodded at Ollie, sat down in the chair next to him. The studio audience was silent. 70 million people were watching at home. Everyone understood what was happening. This wasn't going to be a normal interview. Carson let the silence build for a moment. Then he smiled, that famous Johnny Carson smile that could defuse anything. Well, gentlemen, this is unexpected. But since we're all here, let's talk. Eastwood nodded. Ollie waited. Clint, you've made a career playing tough guys. Men who do what needs to be done. Men who don't back down. What do you think makes someone tough? Eastwood took his time answering. He always did. It was part of his appeal. The man who didn't need to rush, who knew exactly what he wanted to say. I think toughness is about doing your job, about not complaining, about handling what life throws at you without making excuses. It's not complicated. The audience applauded. That was the Eastwood they knew. Clear, direct, masculine. Carson turned to Ollie. Muhammad, you've been called a lot of things. Tough, brave, also a coward. How would you define toughness? And here's where it started. Ollie smiled, but it wasn't his performance smile. It was something sharper, more dangerous. Johnny, I'm glad you asked that, because I think Mr. Eastwood and I have very different ideas about what toughness means. Eastwood's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He turned slightly in his chair to face Ollie directly. You got something to say to me? I got something to say to everyone watching. Ollie looked at the camera, then back at Eastwood. Mr. Eastwood makes movies about tough guys. Men who shoot first and ask questions later. Men who solve problems with violence. And America loves those movies. They make millions of dollars. But let me ask you something. He paused. Is that real toughness? Or is that just pretend? The studio went dead silent. Eastwood's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. This had just stopped being a friendly conversation. Carson jumped in, trying to defuse. Muhammad, I think Clint would say he's playing characters. I know he's playing characters, Ollie interrupted. That's my point. Mr. Eastwood pretends to be tough for 2 hours on a screen. Then he goes home to his mansion and counts his money. But when this country asked him to actually be tough, when they asked him to serve, to fight, to risk something real, where was he? The question hung in the air like a grenade with a pin pulled. Eastwood's voice was level, controlled. I served my country. Did you? Ollie's tone wasn't aggressive. It was genuinely curious. Tell me, were you ever in combat? I was in the army during Korea. But were you in combat? Eastwood didn't answer immediately. And in that pause, Ollie continued. You weren't. You were stationed in California. You made training films. You taught swimming. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you weren't in danger. You weren't getting shot at. You weren't watching your friends die. You did your service safely, comfortably. And then you went to Hollywood and spent the rest of your life playing characters who did the things you never actually did. The audience was riveted. This wasn't supposed to happen on The Tonight Show. This was real conflict. Unscripted, Dangerous. Eastwood leaned forward. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. I did what I was asked to do. I fulfilled my obligation. You did what you were told to do, Ollie corrected. That's not the same thing. Real toughness isn't following orders when it's safe. Real toughness is standing up when everyone tells you to sit down. Real toughness is saying no when the entire world is telling you to say yes. You're talking about draft dodging. I'm talking about conscience. Ollie's voice rose for the first time. I refused to fight in a war I didn't believe in. And it cost me everything. My title, my license, my freedom, 3.5 years of my career. I lost millions of dollars. I became the most hated man in America. And I did it because I believed killing people in Vietnam was wrong. That's easy to say now that the Supreme Court let you off. The Supreme Court didn't let me off. They ruled that my beliefs were sincere and that I qualified as a conscientious objector. They said I was right all along. But even if they hadn't, even if I'd gone to prison, I'd still believe I did the right thing. Eastwood shook his head. You avoided service while other men died. And here's where Ollie went for the throat. Mr. Eastwood, let me tell you who died. Poor black kids from Louisville died. Poor white kids from Alabama died. Farm boys from Iowa died. Kids who couldn't afford college died. Kids who couldn't get deferments died. But you know who didn't die? Rich kids. Connected kids. Kids whose fathers knew senators. And you know who else didn't die? Movie stars who got cushy assignments making training films in California. The audience gasped. This was beyond anything anyone had expected. Eastwood's face was red now. His control was slipping. I served. You survived. Ollie interrupted. And there's a difference. You did exactly what the system wanted you to do. You followed orders. You stayed safe. And then you got rich playing characters who pretend to be brave. But I actually was brave. I stood up to the United States government. I risked everything. I sacrificed everything. And you're going to sit here and tell me I'm a coward? Carson tried to intervene. Gentlemen, maybe we should. But Eastwood cut him off. His composure was cracking. You think you're some kind of hero? You think refusing to fight makes you brave? I think doing what you believe is right, even when it costs you everything, makes you brave. What do you think makes someone brave, Mr. Eastwood? Following orders? Playing make-believe? Eastwood stood up. For a moment, it looked like he might walk off the stage. The audience held its breath. 70 million people watching at home leaned forward. But Eastwood didn't leave. He stood there, looking down at Ollie, trying to find words, trying to find an angle, trying to find something to say that would win this argument. He couldn't, because everything Ollie had said was true. Eastwood had served safely. He had followed orders. He had done exactly what was expected of him and nothing more. And then he had built a career pretending to be the kind of man who did the things Ollie had actually done. Stood alone, faced consequences, refused to compromise. Ollie stood up too. Now they were face to face. Same height, but completely different energy. Eastwood was rigid, controlled, defensive. Ollie was loose, confident, still smiling. Mr. Eastwood, I'm not trying to insult you. I'm trying to make a point. America loves your movies because they're fantasies. They're stories about men who solve problems with violence and never face consequences. But real life doesn't work like that. Real courage isn't about shooting bad guys. It's about standing up for what you believe, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. Eastwood's voice was quiet now, almost a whisper. You're saying I'm not brave. I'm saying you've never been tested. Not really. You've never had to choose between your conscience and your career, between your freedom and your principles. You've never had to risk everything. And until you have, you don't get to judge people who did. For a long moment, Eastwood just stood there. Then, without a word, he turned and walked off the stage. The audience erupted. Some cheered, some booed, some sat in stunned silence. Carson looked at his notes, then at the camera, then back at Ollie. Well, Carson said, trying to recover. That was unexpected. Ollie sat back down. His smile returned, the performance smile this time. You asked about toughness, Johnny. I thought I'd give you an honest answer. The aftermath was immediate and explosive. NBC received over 50,000 phone calls within an hour of the show ending. The network's switchboard crashed. Some callers were outraged that Ollie had been allowed to attack Eastwood. Others praised him for speaking truth. But everyone had an opinion. The next morning, every newspaper in America ran the story. The New York Times, Ali and Eastwood clash on Carson. The LA Times, draft debate erupts on Tonight Show. The Chicago Tribune, Ali questions Eastwood's courage. Clint Eastwood released a statement through his publicist the next day. It was brief. I respect Mr. Ali's right to his opinion. I fulfilled my military obligation as asked. I have nothing further to say on the matter. He never spoke about the incident again. Not in interviews. Not in his memoir. Not even to friends. It was as if October 12th, 1972 had been erased from his personal history. But the tape survived, and over the years, it became legendary. Film students studied it. Veterans watched it. People who remembered watching it live told their children about it. It became shorthand for a specific moment in American culture. The moment when the fantasy of masculinity that Eastwood represented collided with the reality that Ali embodied. In 1998, the American Film Institute did a retrospective on Eastwood's career. At the premiere screening, a reporter asked Eastwood if he'd ever regretted his confrontation with Ali. Eastwood paused for a long time before answering. Then he said, Ali was right about one thing. I never had to choose between my conscience and my country. I don't know what I would have done if I'd been in his position, and I hope I never have to find out. It was the closest Eastwood ever came to acknowledging what had happened that night. Muhammad Ali never mentioned the incident in his interviews either. But years later, when asked about the definition of courage, Ali said something that people who'd watched the Carson show immediately recognized. Courage isn't about how tough you look. It's about how much you're willing to lose for what you believe. Anyone can pretend to be brave. It takes a different kind of man to actually be brave when it costs you everything. The Tonight Show appearance was never officially released on VHS or DVD. NBC claimed the tape had been lost, but bootleg copies circulated for decades. And in 2015, when the full archive was digitized, the clip was finally uploaded to YouTube. It's been viewed 47 million times. The top comment, with 350,000 likes, reads, "The moment Dirty Harry learned that real toughness doesn't come from a .44 Magnum." The story of what happened on The Tonight Show on October 12th, 1972, is more than just a celebrity confrontation. It's a snapshot of a specific moment in American history when two competing visions of masculinity, courage, and national identity collided on live television. Clint Eastwood represented the traditional ideal: silent, stoic, obedient, a man who did his duty without complaint and solved problems through action rather than words. Muhammad Ali represented something newer and more complicated: vocal, defiant, principled, a man who refused to do what he was told if he believed it was wrong and was willing to pay the price for that refusal. For 70 million people watching that night, the question wasn't just who won the argument. It was which kind of man do we want to be? And the fact that Eastwood walked off the stage without an answer, the fact that he couldn't defend his position, couldn't articulate why following orders made someone brave, couldn't counter Ali's challenge, said everything that needed to be said. Because in the end, Ali didn't just win an argument. He exposed something fundamental about American mythology. He proved that the heroes we celebrate in movies, the tough guys who shoot first and never question orders, are fantasies. And that real heroism looks different. Messier, more complicated, more costly. Anyone can play a hero on screen. It takes a different kind of courage to be one in real life. If this story moved you, remember, the hardest battles aren't fought with fists or guns. They're fought with words, with principles, with a willingness to stand alone when everyone else is sitting down. Muhammad Ali understood that. And on October 12, 1972, in front of 70 million people, he taught Clint Eastwood and America what real toughness actually means.